we need to do that. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol nihya b'baro. And so let's go back to Susan's award. Studying Tractate Eruvin is an enormous accomplishment. I went to a yeshiva in high school where we would study something like in the range of 10 to 15 folios of Talmud per year. And Tractate Eruvin is a huge tractate. We would have never even gotten 20% through it throughout the entire year. Studying Talmud is the rabbinic mainstream. Okay, last week we talked about the creators of the Kabbalah. All of them were major rabbinic leaders and scholars of vast Talmudic erudition. And all of these people at the exact same time were Kabbalists. That was part of the paradox that we talked about last week. That Kabbalah, at one and the same time, is extraordinarily radical and hyper-conservative, okay? In what way is it radical? Well, it describes God, and it has radical ideas about what God is, this duality of the unknown God and the known God of the Sfirot, and the relationships between the Sfirot and the balance that they need, and that human action doing the commandments can have a positive influence on those things, or that evil human action can have a negative influence on the Sfirot. That's what we studied about last week, and that is the radical side of Kabbalah. The conservative, or even hyper, ultra-conservative side of Kabbalah is that it takes every detail of the commandments and makes it important on a vast cosmic scale. If you do the mitzvah in the right way, you will have cosmic effects. If you mess up even a small detail, that will also have cosmic effects. The other thing that made Kabbalah hyper-conservative, or perhaps that allowed this paradox to exist, is the identity of its practitioners. Last week, like I just said, we saw that these were the foremost Talmudists of the generation, were also the people who built the Kabbalah in Provence and in Spain. And when you have the rabbinic elite as the practitioners of Kabbalah, then you know that the Kabbalah will always stay on the straight and narrow, okay? And what enabled this to happen is simply the fact that it was a secret, okay? You have the open Torah and you have the hidden Torah. Since the hidden Torah is hidden, nobody has to worry about it. The only people who are dealing with it are these fantastic rabbinic scholars, the elite of the generation, the Talmudists, the ones who care about mitzvot and halacha and teach it to the people. Those are the people who are doing Kabbalah. If you want to think about it in another way, in other words, to give an opposite example, okay, even in the philosophical world, it was, at least during Maimonides' lifetime, it was the greatest Talmudist of the generation who was also the master of secrets. Maimonides himself, the greatest rabbi in 2,000 years, he was also the master of secrets. He did indeed claim to know the secret Torah, not the same one as the Kabbalists. He thought the secret Torah was Aristotelian philosophy, but that secret he would only teach to scholars. It wasn't something to be revealed. It has to be kept hidden, okay? So when the secret Torah is kept secret, you can have this paradox existing and continuing in some kind of harmony, right? You have this very conservative culture with its very conservative rabbinic leadership, teaching very conservative ideas about how Jews need to live. And at the very same time, when they're dealing within their secretive elite, they're talking about radical secrets that undermine almost all of that. And yet those secrets don't cause any earthquakes. Why? Because they are kept secret. Okay? Nonetheless, the secrets themselves had the potential to undermine this rabbinic conservatism. And this could happen in two ways that I want to add to last week. Okay? The first way is the idea of dveikut. Dveikut is something that I did not have a chance to mention last week. Dveikut in the Bible simply means to walk in the paths of God and follow his commandments. In fact, you have a commandment in the Torah about dveikut, which is uvo tidbakun, right? You shall cleave to him, you shall cleave to God. And that, in a plain sense.
Avi, I didn't understand what you said. It's the last part.
In the Bible, you have the idea of dveikut, of cleaving to God, okay? And what it means in the plain sense of the text in the Bible is simply to walk in God's ways, okay? To keep God's commandments. A very simple idea, a very open idea, no secrets involved, okay? It's a very, very, it's an open idea. There's no secrets. And yet, if we talk about the Kabbalists, the early Kabbalists, like the Ramban, Nachmanides, whom we talked about last week, dveikut takes on a new meaning. What is the meaning of dveikut? Well, think about it this way. Sometimes if you really, really, really love and admire somebody, you can take it too far and you can lose yourself in the other person. Okay? This is something that happens to us. That is sort of how the Kabbalists took the idea of dveikut. Not to walk in God's ways, not to just to keep his commandments, but to utterly lose yourself in God. In what sense? In what sense? What ultimately differentiates you from another person is your sense of self, right? It's your sense of identity, your sense in Hebrew of ani, of I, anochi, I am. And what the Ramban said, and this is not the Ramban, this is based on the Ramban, but it's not the Ramban who said it. It was said this way by the Maggid of Mezrich later on in Chassidut. He took this idea of losing yourself in God, and he said that what dveikut means is simply to reverse the letters in the word ani. Aleph, Nun, Yud spells ani, I. The Maggid of Midreshet, basing himself on this idea of the Ramban, said that what is dveikut? It's to change the ani, the I, into ayin, into nothing. Ani means I am. Ayin means nothing. I am not. We saw ayin last week as a term for the hidden aspect of God, the aspect of God which human beings cannot know. And now the Maggid of Midreshet is saying, and the Ramban is really saying the same thing, just without the letters, is that to join with God is to lose yourself in God. And in the Kabbalah, this becomes the way that you do two very important religious activities, one of which we do today, and one of which we probably don't do too much today, but is still considered something very important and connected to Messianism. The two activities are prayer on the one hand and prophecy on the other hand. Okay, prayer we do. Prophecy we read about, right? People were prophets. Prophecy perhaps we even hope for, because when we saw Maimonides' idea of Messianism, we saw that the Messiah is going to be a scholar, a philosopher, and perhaps even a prophet. Okay? We saw also early sources that the Messiah is going to be a prophet. In Kabbalah, prayer and prophecy become the same thing. They become identical. Theoretically, of course, they're opposites, not theoretically. In the plain sense, they are opposites, because in prayer, you talk to God, while in prophecy, God talks to you, right? It's the opposite direction. It's two different, it's rivers flowing in two different directions. Am I turning to God in prayer, or is God turning to me in prophecy? But in Kabbalah, they turn into the same thing through dvekut. They are both acts of dvekut. What are you supposed to be doing when you pray? Not asking God for things for the ani, not asking God for things for me, but rather dvekut, becoming one with God, losing myself in God. The same thing happens to the prophet. The prophet loses himself in God, and that's how the prophet hears God or sees God or experiences God. Prophecy comes through dvekut. Okay. So if prophecy is so important, and if prophecy happens through the ayin, through turning yourself into nothingness, through utterly losing your sense of self, this is also something that can be taken in very radical directions. So let's consider a few radical points that are going to become the basis for the Messiah of this evening, and for more than one Messiah in the evenings to come. One we discussed last week is that the Torah, its letters, okay, its letters, they are, so let's give them even numbers. Number one is Torah. The Torah's letters we saw last week can be read as a sequence. You can divide the words differently, and therefore the Torah can have infinite meanings. That was also an idea of the Ramban of Nachmanides. And Nachmanides was, like I said, a Talmudist, and yet this idea that you can cut up the letters of the Torah whichever way you want is such a radical idea that it almost seems to utterly undermine the idea of a standard Talmudist. Okay, I'll give you an example. It's not just the letters of the Torah. In the Torah, we have a mitzvah in Exodus, a mitzvah between fellow human beings about digging a pit in a public area. Okay? If you dig a pit in a public area, the Torah says that you are liable if an animal or a person, right, falls in, gets injured, gets killed. You created this this danger, this dangerous thing in the public area, so you are liable. Fine. The Talmud, not in Eruvin, but in I believe it's in Nezikin, you have in the Talmud. You have in the Talmud a conceptualization of this. It gets ever further removed from the Torah. It's not a pit. It's anything that you put in a public place, right? You could leave a chair in a public thoroughfare and somebody could be injured. It doesn't have to be a pit. So a pit isn't a pit. A pit now becomes a concept. Same too with public place versus a private place. And and I see that the recording was turned off. Wait, hold on. Public place versus a private place.
It's recording.
Oh, you're recording,
Yes, I'm
Don?
recording. Yeah, you didn't turn it on. I turned it on.
Okay, so okay. Okay. So anyway, so you have these conceptual ideas of the public place and the private area, and how you define them and how you distinguish them. And as time goes on, these conceptual legal discussions, they become ever and ever more removed from the verses of the Torah. Now, this is part of something that many of the Kabbalists felt. Certainly not Nachmanides, but as time went on, there were Kabbalists who began to feel that this over-conceptualization and removal from the Torah, from the verses of the Torah, wasn't to their liking. And they wanted something which would, bring meaning in a different way, okay? To use a different example, let's take a story in the Torah. Jacob had relationships with Rachel and with Leah. So if you're reading the story in the Torah, you try to understand how the relationship was, what they say to each other, what they do towards each other. And then in the Kabbalah, it becomes something much less trivial, much less this worldly. It becomes relationships between these powers in the upper universes. So there was a certain discomfort with traditional Torah study among some of the practitioners of the Kabbalah. And that also is something we're going to touch on tonight, this desire to learn Torah in a completely new way. So number one is Torah. Number two is dvekut, okay? That you utterly lose yourself, you lose your sense of self. Prophecy and prayer become the same thing. And these become the main ways to become close to God. And finally, for the third one, this idea that you can act upon God, and you can God, and that everything you do has these cosmic consequences, is also a radical idea with the potential to undermine the traditional ideas that gird the Jewish way of life during the Middle Ages. Okay, we're now going to learn about a Messiah who reflects almost everything that I've said so far tonight. Okay, he didn't have a natural sense of closeness to what the rabbinic elite taught and emphasized. He wasn't a great rabbinic scholar, unlike the other practitioners of Kabbalah at this time. He may not have been too much of a scholar at all in terms of classic Talmudic learning. He wasn't, this is very hard to say, but apparently it's true, okay? He wasn't all that concerned with the mitzvot themselves. Okay, I'll explain what I mean by that. I'm not saying that he was, I don't know, a modern atheist or a non-observant Jew. Okay, he wasn't. There were very few, if any, people like that in the Middle Ages. We have every reason to assume that, that the man we're going to study this evening, Abraham Abulafia, that more or less at least, he kept the commandments just like other Jews around him did. When I say that he didn't have this deep sense of closeness to the commandments, what I mean by that is that he was different from all the other Kabbalists in the sense that he didn't share their constant obsession with this hyper-conservative idea that every detail of every commandment impacts the sfirot. That's what most Kabbalists dealt with. That's what most Kabbalists talked about. They talked about letters in the Torah and details of the mitzvot and how everything affects the sfirot. Abraham Abulafia simply wasn't into that. He probably kept the commandments, right? But his thought wasn't focused on the idea of how the commandments affect God or the sfirot. We'll talk a little bit now about who this man is, about his lifetime, about some of the things that he did and some of the things that happened to him. And then we're going to deal with some texts, either that he himself wrote or that were written about him. Okay? So, the first thing to understand is that we're not talking about regular Kabbalah of the 13th century. Okay? Regular Kabbalah is what I talked about last week, with the 10 sfirot and the duality between the utterly hidden God and the God that can be known in the 10 sfirot, and the ways that they balance, and the ways that they affect each other, and the ways that human beings can affect them through Torah study and through doing the mitzvot and through dveikut with God. All of that was mainstream Kabbalah. Abraham Abulafia's kind of Kabbalah developed on the side, not only on the side intellectually, like you have two ways of thinking of things that are happening at the same time, but also culturally. Culturally meaning that the mainstream Kabbalah was going on, it was happening among the rabbinic elites, while the Kabbalah of Abraham Abulafia was happening among people who had no place among the rabbinic elites. Okay? He was born in Saragossa in 1240. His father died when he was age 18. He apparently studied with his father until age 18 and got a basic education of Mikra, meaning Bible, of Mishnah, but an extraordinary Talmudic scholar he apparently was not. Jennifer has a question. Spain. Yes. Okay. He was not a world-class Torah scholar like the Ramban or Rabbeinu Yonah Gerondi or the people we talked about last week. This guy liked to travel. His whole life, he was traveling and he was exploring. After his father died at age 18, he traveled towards the land of Israel and also to other places. And his mission was to find the river Sambation. Does anybody know what the river Sambation is? All right. Well, in rabbinic literature, the Sambation is mentioned as one of the places to which the 10 lost tribes of Israel were exiled. They were exiled beyond the river Sambation. Okay, it's like this mythological river that if you find it and if you get there, maybe you'll discover the 10 lost tribes. So he went out to probably discover the 10 lost tribes. He went to areas that are now Israel and Syria, and he spent some time in Akko. Afterwards, he made his way back to Southern Europe, and he spent time in Italy. And in Italy, he found himself a teacher whom we do not know very much about. And he began studying the secret Torah very, very intensively. But you're going to be surprised about which secret Torah it is. It's Maimonides' Guide of the Perplexed. Okay? He put his all into studying Maimonides' Guide of the Perplexed, which, you know, at first glance, doesn't seem like mysticism. We normally call that rationalism, not mysticism. And as we're going to see, this guy was very, very unusual. His thought was highly, highly unconventional, and certainly not rationalistic, as we'll see as the evening goes on. What in the world is he doing devoting his time to this intensive study of the Guide of the Perplexed? So to address that question, here too we need to understand certain paradoxes that exist. Maimonides is often called a rationalist, and there's very, very good reasons to think of Maimonides as a rationalist. And yet, paradoxically, within the thought of Maimonides, there are elements which can be taken in highly non-rationalistic directions, okay? The main thing for our purposes is the idea of the negative attributes of God, okay? This is something some of you may have heard of. So I'll remind you, and for those who don't know, I'll explain it very briefly. Maimonides says that God cannot be known by human beings. God is utterly different. Human beings are flesh and blood. Human beings live in this world. Human beings as material beings, physical beings, cannot know God. Okay. So what does Maimonides need to do because of that? You know, in the Torah, there's all kinds of descriptions of God. I'm not just talking about God's hand and nose. I'm also talking about descriptions of God as wise or God as powerful. How can you say God is powerful? Because then you're saying that God is like, you know, powerful like a powerful person, just a lot more. But it's not true. God's power is utterly different than that of a human being. God's wisdom is utterly different than that of a human being. So Maimonides says that the best way to describe God, in fact, the only careful way to describe God is negatively. You don't say that God is wise, which makes God sort of human. You rather say that God lacks no wisdom. God lacks no power, etc. Maimonides says that logically, you cannot say positive things about God, and you're best describing God if you describe God in the negative, what God does not lack, how God is not limited. That's the negative theology of Maimonides. Okay? Now, that sounds fairly rationalistic. However, paradoxically, it does have a non-rationalistic or even a mystical potential. Why? Well, when Maimonides says this, Maimonides sort of leaves the next step open, okay? Maimonides is saying that the mind can do no better than to describe God negatively. Okay, so there's two possible reactions to that. The first possible reaction to that is to say, well, if the mind can do no better than to describe God negatively, then that is what I will do. I will describe God negatively, and I'll content myself with that, and I won't go beyond that, and I'll remain a rationalist. Fine, that's one possible reaction. But there's another possible reaction. The other possible reaction is to say that what Maimonides is hinting at or kind of showing you, but not actually telling you is the most the mind can do is describe God negatively. And therefore, if you want more, you're not going to find it rationally. Rather, the place to look for it is outside of reason. Maybe in experience, maybe in a mystical experience. Okay? Abraham Abulafia was extremely disappointed with the limits of rationalism. He was also probably kind of disappointed with even the limits of the conventional elitist mysticism in Spain. He was dissatisfied with all of it. But that didn't mean that he was going to leave Maimonides' Guide of the Perplexed behind. Rather, he wanted to take Maimonides' Guide of the Perplexed to the next level. And what is the next level? It's to write a commentary on the Guide of the Perplexed, which emphasizes wherever the mind has its limits, where to go beyond the mind. Where to go beyond reason. He wrote a commentary called Sodot HaMoreh, The Secrets of the Guide of the Perplexed, which is a Kabbalistic, mystical, non-rationalistic, or maybe better to say, more than rationalistic commentary on the Guide of the Perplexed. And it is possible to do so because of these potentialities that Maimonides left, okay? And because the silence of his negative attributes can actually be taken in a mystical direction. And in general, it's just good to know. In general, it's good to know that even though it is easy to take rationalism and mysticism as opposites, as contradictory, and there's all kinds of good reasons to do that, nevertheless, they are not necessarily so. And there have been people for whom they are not so. By the way, the Rambam's son, Rabbi Abraham, was kind of a Jewish Sufi. And he already began the process of taking his father's thought in a not a completely a rational direction. Okay. After this intense period in Italy, where he's studying the Guide of the Perplexed and perhaps other mystical things too, Avraham Abulafia goes back to Spain. In 1270, we know that he was studying Kabbalah in Barcelona, where none other than the students of Nachmanides, the Ramban, were in Barcelona, the rabbinic elite with their secret Kabbalah that we talked about last week. So it's possible, quite possible, that there he was exposed to it. But his teacher was a person, a Baruch Togarni, about whom we do not know very much. Apparently, in other words, his teacher was not among the rabbinic elite, perhaps not part of the mainstream Kabbalah that was going on in Barcelona at the time. But then in Barcelona, he had a mystical experience, some kind of a mystical experience that, as we'll see very, very shortly, has a lot of things that touch upon prophecy or resemblance to prophecy, very different than the Kabbalists of the Sfirots, who aren't claiming prophecy very much. Okay, and he wrote a book called Vizot Yehuda. Now we'll see our first text. What I'll do is I'll share the link that I gave you. I gave you a link to the text in the WhatsApp, and I'm also going to share it on the screen now. I just need to do share screen. Hello, wake up, computer. Computer, wake up. Um, okay, wait. Ah, here, I got it. Okay, so what I need now is, no. What I need is this. Everything seems to have slowed down to a, oh, come on. It's a Google Doc. It's Messianism number 4. And it's about, the second part is about Avraham Abulafia. All the people who are on Zoom, I'm just waiting, my computer is not responding. I'm going to share.
Is this the text that you sent out to us?
Yeah, it's the text I sent a link to.
Bobby, if you want, I can
I'm
put it
also
on my
trying
computer. I can share it on my computer.
Stop. Oh boy. Ah, did you get it? You have my screen? Okay. Yalla. No. Do people see my screen? I guess so.
We see your screen.
It says Zoom.
Get to the, okay, you see, okay, at least you see the screen. Now I just have to get the doc on the screen, but it's not responding fast. Okay, here it is. Please open.
Bobby, you want me to share it on my screen?
Here it is. It's open here. Wait. It's beginning to respond. Okay. Okay. I'm going to go page down. It's very slow. Wow. I don't know what happened here. Let's see. You've got the text, but it's not scrolling it. Everything is stuck. Page unlocked.
There's a square in the upper right corner that looks like a piece of dotted carbon paper or something, material. And it's blocking some of the
Wait, I'm going to
text.
reload it. Oh, the square, the participants? Wait.
Oh, now you just made that.
Now it's all the way across the screen.
Why don't you let Doc put it up?
Okay. Hold on. It's loading now, the page. It's reloading. Oh, come on. Yeah, but then I can't scroll. Okay.
It's showing us the end of the last page.
Showing you the end of the last page? Ah, I see.
Clear,
The last
lifelike.
English paragraph that says clear lifelike description of mystical experience.
Yeah, I just can't move it. It's so weird. Let's see if I can close this. Move this up here. Oh, come on. I can't do this. And I've never had something like this in Google Docs before, that the page is unresponsive. Exit pages, no? All right, put it on for now, Don. But if I can get the text, I'll load it. Exit pages, no? Yalla. Ah,
Now it's back to Zoom.
now it's back to Zoom.
Now it's your Gmail page.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to upload the doc from the Gmail page. If something will respond.
And that square that looks like suit material.
Yeah,
What
it's
looks
gray
like-
pinstripe.
Here,
Diagonal
docs.
gray pinstripe.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I don't understand what you're saying. Here. Okay, Google Docs is loading now at least. Don, I had it loading. Hold on. What, Don?
I'm unshared. I'm no longer sharing.
You're not on sharing?
I am not sharing. You are free to share.
Okay, hold on. Now, this will load. Let's slow everything down again. Come on. Messiness. Okay. Don't do anything. It's loading now and it's not stuck.
But we can't see it.
Okay, well, you'll see in a second.
Hold on, Richard.
So, duh.
You just have to share it. Yes. You see now, right? No.
Nope, not,
You see now, right?
now we have it.
Yeah.
Now you have it. Okay, go up. Okay, I apologize for that. Okay, so last week we did the Kabbalistic idea of history. I'll skip down. Here's Avraham Abulafia. Okay. This is the text of the first calling towards Abraham Abulafia. He writes, and he, meaning God, called me by name, Abraham, Abraham. And I said, here I am. He taught me the way of justice and woke me like a man from his sleep to compose something new, unlike anything written in my time. Well, that little paragraph there already tells us a lot. Who got called, first of all, with Abraham, and Abraham says, Hineni. This is the prophecy of Abraham right before the binding of Isaac. And remember that his name, Abraham Abulafia, is Abraham. So he's basing it on that. And he's being called like the prophet Abraham. And he says, he taught me the way of justice and woke me like a man from his sleep, until now I was asleep, to compose something new, unlike anything written in my time. This is crazy. Okay? Why is this crazy? Can anyone tell me why this is crazy? Because last week we spent so much time on the idea that Kabbalah, despite radical ideas, was in its guts, it was hyper-conservative, right? That's why the Kabbalists called it Kabbalah. We say nothing new. We are only transmitting those secrets which we received from our teachers, and we transmit them to our students with no changes at all. Kabbalah claimed for itself, the mainstream Kabbalah, to be hyper-conservative. It's not just that I'm saying it was, right? It claimed that for itself. And yet Abulafia, not only is he not claiming that, He's claiming the opposite. He knew that he was composing things that were utterly new, unlike anything ever written before. He's also claiming himself to be a prophet. Claiming yourself to be a prophet is against the fabric of the rabbinic tradition, which says that prophecy already ended. He continues, I subdued myself and forced myself to do a thing somewhat beyond my capabilities. My generation called me a heretic because I truly served God, unlike those who walk in darkness. Here we see it. Here we see it, folks. This is a guy who wants to serve God in the true way, as he sees it, but other people don't see it that way. When he says that his generation called him a heretic, it's not clear whether he's talking about the rabbinic elite or whether he's just talking about, regular Jews on the street or around him who thought he was nuts, okay? And it could have been both. But people are calling him a heretic. He says, why? Because I truly serve God. And he's saying, and this is completely unconservative, if that's a word, okay? Unlike those who walk in darkness, the regular Jews who served God and kept the commandments, they are people who walk in darkness. Only I see the light. Since those people are sinking in the pit and would have been happy to drag me down with them with their trivialities and their deeds done out of ignorance. In other words, they would have been very happy if I was just pedestrian like them, if I was just a simple Jew or regular Jew just like them, if I was trivial just like them. But heaven forfend I did that, for I would not leave the ways of truth for the ways of falsehood. Okay? Now this feeling with Avraham Abulafia, it's very, very radical and very strange and weird, as we're going to see. And yet, this is something that any Jew can feel in a certain way. If you really are trying to be a good Jew, and you think that God should be served in a certain way, then it's very likely that you're going to see the people around you as being in error. Okay, if you're very good-hearted, then you can give them the benefit of the doubt. They don't know any better, right? But they haven't, they don't see the light like I do. You can have that feeling, but whenever you think that God should be served in a way which isn't the mainstream regular way to do so, you're going to end up feeling a little bit like Avraham Abulafia. And yet for Avraham Abulafia, it was like times a million, okay? Because he was really strange. And he was living in a very conservative, very traditional time. And he was utterly, utterly unlike the people around him. Now we're going to see one of the people around him. Okay? The person we're going to read from now, the text is in Hebrew because I found I had no available source to translate it into English. So what I'll do is I'll go through it reading and translating. But first, let's talk a little bit about who this man is and the text that he writes. This is Shut Arashba, Shelotu Tshuvot, the responsa of the Rashba. The Rashba was Rabbi Shlomo ben Adrit, and he was the greatest student of the Ramban of Nachmanides. He, like his teacher Nachmanides, was the foremost Talmudist in his generation in Spain. He was the rabbinic leader of Spain in his time. And he was widely respected all around the Jewish world. We're going to see, certainly at least in Italy, he has here a correspondence with Italy, where our friend Avraham Abulafia found himself at various points in his life. And the Rashba was also a Kabbalist, like his teacher, the Ramban, the mainstream Kabbalah that we talked about last week. What we're going to see now is an historical first, the very first time ever that Kabbalah becomes a public scandal. Avraham Abulafia was the man. He made history. Okay? The first time that Kabbalah becomes a public scandal. Now, why did Kabbalah never become a public scandal before this? It's been around for a bit already. Why not? I think you all should know the reason. It remains outside public awareness and doesn't become a public scandal as long as it remains what, everybody? A secret.
Good.
Okay? If it's a secret, it's okay. If it's a secret, it doesn't matter how potentially radical the ideas are because they're a secret. But once something becomes public, then you have the potential for a scandal. And you're going to see all of the things that the Rashba says about various annoying people in Spain and about Avraham Abulafia in particular, okay? He's going to say he's very disturbed. He found himself in the spot where he had to be the person, you know, making order and enforcing discipline, and he didn't like all these upstarts very much, okay? And yet, what really may be bothering the Rashba in the passage that we're about to read is that Kabbalah was supposed to be a secret. It was supposed to be outside of public awareness so that it could never be a scandal. And when does that end? That ends when you have an upstart who isn't a serious Talmudic scholar and isn't a real leader, and he starts, you know, telling everybody that they're not serving God the right way and that he's a prophet and that God called to him and that he can do amazing things with letters, as we will get to tonight. Okay? So this letter isn't about just one person, but it has a major passage about Abulafia. But I'm going to read the first part, even though it's not directly about Abulafia, just to get a flavor of the text. Okay, you can follow my mouse where I'm reading. זה אשר כתבתי לקהילות אשר שאלוני על דברת נביא אווילה. He says, this is what I wrote to the communities. In the communities, he means communities outside of Spain. He got a letter from Italy, okay, about the matter of the Navi Evila. What is an Evil? Anybody? It could be a sinner. It's also a wrongdoer, also someone without wisdom. Okay, a mischief maker. And some of this, by the way, rhymes. I'm going to translate it so you won't hear the rhyme so much. But he's so passionate about all the people who cause trouble that he rhymes in his description of them or his castigation of them. Shemuot yevahaluni umagidim ba'alata. I hear these rumors and I'm getting these messages. Dvarim mechusim min halev u'min hasechel, things hidden from the heart and from the mind. V'timhom levav yamiduni, and they're forcing me these things to stand. Hine amadati al ktovchem hanichbad. I went through what you wrote to me. Gam kodem ba sifrechem, before the actual letter. He's heard things that they've written and said about these messiahs or these prophets. Higia ish nosei elai tav meit Rabbi Avraham HaSofer. Avi ha'ish ahu Rabbi Nisim misaper mikreu. And he's now going to talk about a person by the name of Rabbi Nisim. Va'omar ki zeh dalid shanim, for 4 years. Hechel ruach Hashem lefa'amo. He says that this is a verse from the book of Judges, right? That the Spirit of God has been awakening him for 4 years. Pam behakitz, pam b'chalomo. Sometimes he gets a prophecy when he's awake. Sometimes he gets a prophecy when he's asleep in a dream. Umalach dover ve'et shmo yigid lo, and the angel speaks to him and calls his name. V'chikatavlo sefer chav gimel yadot al niyar. If I understand this correctly, it's the angel who writes him a book with 23 folios. Okay, v'karalo oto plaot hachokma, the wisdom that he got from the angels. He calls it the amazing things of wisdom. Now he's writing a commentary on what the angel gave him. In other words, for every folio that the angel gave him, he writes 2 pages of a commentary, 2 folios of commentary. Gam shalach li zikron 50 prakim. I had to go through 50 chapters of his stuff. Udvarim elu nistapku beinai uvilibi harbe me'od. And all of this stuff, it didn't seem kosher to me, let's say. V'omnam terem agid lachem svekati bazeh, ashiv etchem davar al asher raiti b'ktovchem. All right, we'll skip down now. He goes on and on about all of these people that he doesn't like. And we'll get to the passage on Avraham Abulafia. In other words, what we just read in English, that was my translation, the 2 paragraphs before. What we just read in English is what Avraham Abulafia says about himself and about the people around him, right? I am serving God. I'm not falling into the pit of trivialities of all the Jews around me who don't know how to serve God. God has called me Abraham, and he said, here am I. And I'm writing things, these things of wisdom, revealing secrets that no one before me has ever written, even though Kabbalah is supposed to be a tradition and very conservative. Right? That's how Avraham Abulafia describes himself. Now let's see how the Rashba describes him. Ve'echad mehem haya oto hanaval, shem rishayim yirkav. Right? This despicable person, may the name of the wicked rot. Oto Avraham, shesam shemo navi Mashiach b'Sicilia. Okay? This is that Abraham who declared himself 2 things. He declared himself to be both a prophet and a Messiah in Sicily. Ufatach ksavav, upita b'ksavav kama mibnei Yisrael. And he pita in English. He lefatot.
Tempted.
He drew towards himself. What?
Tempted.
Yes, thank you. He tempted, that's the word. He tempted, okay, people of Israel, meaning Jews, right, with his lies. And had I not closed the door on him, meaning I forcibly stopped his activities, the chemlat Hashem, by the mercy and pity of God. Imrov ktavai v'kidvei kilot hakodesh. How did I do this? By writing these dictums and putting them on walls and having the community issue edicts against this man. Kim'at she'idchil v'haya mechale b'rov dvarav hadimyonim v'hakozvim. Otherwise, he would have started a process and he would have destroyed with his imaginary words, with his lies. Shahayu, this is important. Shahayu ki chochmot rabot le'evil. Okay? For the foolish, his lies were as if they were high, elevated aspects of wisdom. Okay? That's what really bugs the Rashba. The Rashba knows what true wisdom is. Not just Talmudic wisdom like Shrektet Eruvin, the Caroline did, but also Kabbalistic wisdom. He received the tradition from master teachers. He's not going places and writing things that nobody has ever written before. He knows what mystical wisdom is, and he doesn't reveal his wisdom, his mystical wisdom, to foolish people. He only reveals it to those to whom who are worthy of knowing it. But what does this guy do, says the Rashba? He takes his utter stupidity, and the people around him think that it is great wisdom. Vishnatan da'ato alehem kama yamim uvehatmada ma shaya margil atzmo bo. So he would constantly teach this stuff. V'lokeach haktuvim v'divrei chachamim b'gematriot. So what was his great wisdom? He would take the ktuvim, meaning the verses of the Bible, v'divrei chachamim b'gematriot, and the words of the sages of Israel and the Talmud and the Midrash, sometimes, not as often as you might think, but sometimes they dealt with gematriot. They dealt with the numerical meaning of letters and words. And he would do this stuff. ומערב בהם מעט דברים אמיתיים לקוחים מספרי החוכמה. He would use some real gematrias, meaning from the Talmud or the Midrash, and then he would do tons and tons and tons of gematria on his own. Gematria, right, the numerical values of letters, is something that there's no end to, right? You can do it infinitely, and you can arrive at almost any conclusion. Okay, we'll continue a little bit. Aval zeh she'amartem shaya am haaretz yadua v'shelo hurgal im shum adam. The people in Italy said they were just flabbergasted by this guy. This is why they're writing to Spain, because he came from Spain, right? And they're flabbergasted by this guy because he's talking about these depths of wisdom and revealing secrets and all of that, and yet he seems to be an Amaretz. People see him not as a scholar; they see him as an Amaretz, as a boor. V'shelo hurgal im shum adam, meaning that people didn't even like to hang around him because he was weird, because he was strange, maybe because he wasn't educated in the way they thought people should be educated. Although regalim shum adam, v'lo amad al shum adam, people didn't get him and he didn't get people. V'lo amad al shum sefer midivrei chokhmah, and he seemed not to know scholarship, right? And this, today you can feel this way too, but certainly in the Middle Ages, who in their right mind would go around talking about the deep secrets of the Torah if the person didn't even know basic books? כמו שאמרו קצת מבני אדם מאותו שומרים שהיו יודעים לפנים. All right, let's go down a little bit. We're not going to read most of this long thing. Okay, what you have here is all the stuff that he does. Okay, Don is asking about followers. From the description of the Rashba, it sounds like he doesn't have too many followers except for foolish people who think that he's really talking about a wisdom. And yet, first of all, he did stuff. Okay, we're going to talk about what he did. He actually proclaimed himself the Messiah. And secondly, he had an effect on later generations that we'll talk about at the end. Okay, we'll get to that in the last part. Okay. We'll skip down. A question here, yeah?
Hearing voices and responding. I mean, it's just, how
Okay.
many people can you meet in a mental health silly.
Okay.
Who know great secrets. I mean, I worked for a while in Midreshet, he was
Jenny says she worked in mental health, and
suicide, and then after
yeah.
the pastor begins to tell you about all of
And Jenny says that there's people who are mentally troubled, that once once they get to know you and they feel they can talk to you, they tell you all these crazy things. Okay, so how can you know, or what do you do with such people? Jenny is asking.
I mean, in this century where they're more common,
Uh,
to look up to them as people who knew something.
all right, so Jenny is saying what? In the Middle Ages, was it more common to take such people seriously? My gut, I can just give you my gut reaction. My gut reaction to that is to say perhaps somewhat less. Okay, the Middle Ages was a very traditional era. Okay, and the community had a lot of control. I mean, ultimately, the Rashba got rid of this guy and stopped him from doing whatever it was he wanted to do. Okay, when communities have control like that, it's a lot harder to get out of line. Okay, and I would suppose that today, especially with mass communication, if you have somebody who's a little bit crazy, it's much easier to get people to listen and to get a following. And so it could be, despite the fact that we say that today, you know, we're all educated and the Middle Ages was the Dark Ages, it could be that in the Middle Ages there was less tolerance for and less opportunity for this kind of thing. And yet, as we'll see with Shabtai Tzvi, okay, Shabtai Tzvi is already the end of the Jewish Middle Ages. And yet, we'll see with Shabtai Tzvi that it's possible to have not only a following, but to have not only a following, not only a mass following, but to have an almost universal following. Okay, it is possible. Okay, in that sense, you might say that Shabtai Tzvi, whom we'll get to, was a lot more successful than Avraham Abulafia. Yeah. Yeah.
Talking about an experience that he had.
Yeah.
He had this experience of God talking to him. Obviously, he was not a scholar. He wasn't very good at mathematics. On the other hand, some of the prophets, our prophets, were also not scholarly people. They were not the PC class like
Yeah.
like Amos.
Yeah.
So it's quite possible that he actually had this experience,
Yeah.
and that he found his way to understand it, or.
Okay. Don is asking a good question. He says that, you know, he's claiming himself to be a prophet, and the criticism against him is that he's not educated. But the prophets of the Bible were not educated, Don is asking. I think to answer that, it should be said that Maimonides had this problem. Maimonides is the one who says that prophets are scholars. The prophecy is wisdom. That's Maimonides. And so Maimonides has to find some way to read the biblical stories in such a manner that you won't have prophecy without wisdom. And it's not very easy to do. When we did Spinoza, we saw how Spinoza ridicules Maimonides for that. He says it's crazy to say that the prophets of the Bible were scholars. They were not scholars at all, right? Right. Yeah. Moses is a shepherd. Lots of them were shepherds. So that's one thing. I think the issue here is not prophecy for the Rashba, quite as much as secrets. Okay, the secret Torah is only meant to be taught to scholars. That comes straight out of the Mishnah. Okay, it's only meant to be taught to scholars. So who the heck is this guy with all of his secrets. He shouldn't be doing secrets. He should be studying Tractate Eruvin. And maybe if he gets through that, maybe somebody, will find him worthy of teaching him secrets. But before he does that, who the heck is he to deal with this? Okay. Okay. Now, before we go on and see a text by Avraham Abulafia, where he begins to describe both his experiences and the kinds of exercises that he uses in order to achieve a dveikut with God. Before we do that, let's finish his story. Because in Spain, there was no tolerance for him, he spent the rest of his life in Italy. Now, in Italy, apparently, there were people who didn't like him very much either. All right, but he remained there. He remained there, and finally, in the year 1280, he decided to go to Rome and meet the Pope and declare himself as the Messiah of the Jews. Okay, now, there actually is an idea, a traditional Jewish idea, that the Messianic age begins in Rome. Now, Rome is the center of the Roman Empire that destroyed Jerusalem. Rome is the center of Christianity, becomes the center of Christianity, which oppresses the Jews. The Pope, so to speak, is the king of the Christians, right? He's the one, he's Pharaoh, okay? And Avraham Abulafia sees himself as going to Pharaoh and saying, let my people go, right? He's going to go to the Pope. He's going to say, let my people go, stop oppressing them, right? And he's going to redeem the Jews from the Pope. Okay. So what happens when you're a Jew? Many people think that you're a crazy, insane Jew, and you go to see the Pope and declare yourself Moses and that the Pope is Pharaoh, and you're going to tell the Pope, let my people go. What would you imagine happens to such a person?
Nothing good.
Get
What?
thrown out or in jail?
Rubber
They
room.
get thrown out. They get thrown out.
They get thrown out. Well, you're lucky if you get thrown out.
I said nothing good.
Nothing good. Nothing good.
What-
Well, he was on his way to Rome, and the Pope was informed of his imminent arrival. And the Pope said, where that city where he's at, set up a pyre and burn him. Okay? So they're going to set up a pyre and burn him. And then you know what happens? You're not going to believe it if you don't know the story. The Pope dies. Yeah, the Pope dies before the death sentence can be carried out. Abulafia was in luck. And what happened in the end was that they threw him in prison for a month. But apparently there was a big balagan, and the Pope's death sentence was never, the previous Pope's death sentence was never carried out. After a month, he was released from prison. Okay? In Italy, Don asked, did he have any followers? Apparently he had his own study hall, and he had students. I don't know if we know how many. And that is where he wrote most of his writings. And most of his writings means a lot of writings, okay? I will be totally honest with you. When I was preparing this class initially, several weeks ago, I was terrified. How would I teach this if I don't have any of the text? Where am I going to find the text of Avraham Abulafia? I wanted to find them in English, but I wasn't even sure I was going to be able to find them in Hebrew without the library. But that was a really stupid thing to be afraid of. Why? Because anything that has any relation to Kabbalah, somebody has put on the internet. It turns out there's an entire website devoted to mystical writings that has all of Avraham Abulafia's writings. It's a whole bunch of books, okay? And it's all been typed. and it's all been uploaded. It's been uploaded to this website, so it was easy to find the texts and to put them here.
I have a question.
Yes, yes.
What language did he actually write in?
He wrote in Hebrew.
Okay.
And in fact, as you'll see, his Hebrew is not even that hard. Okay, he wrote in, I don't know, in a very basic kind of Hebrew. Now, what are these writings that he wrote at the end of his life, after all of his wanderings and his fights with the rabbis of Spain and his attempt to see the Pope? What does he write about? He writes about consciousness, how to free consciousness, how to expand consciousness. Our consciousness, says Avraham Abulafia, is imprisoned by our senses. Our consciousness is limited by the world that we live in the world that we imbibe, in the world that we see and feel and touch. Okay? So Abulafia says, how do you free your consciousness? Instead of your consciousness being rooted in your human, physical, this worldly experiences, consciousness needs to latch onto a different object, an object which touches upon infinity, an object which has no limits. And the object which can free you from your senses is language. Language, says Abulafia, is limitless. Language can not only express anything, language can be used in any way. Language is ultimately composed of speech, which is composed of sentences, which is composed of words, which is composed of letters. And this should remind you of last week. What did Nachmanides say about the letters of the Torah? You can divide them any way you want. Okay, you can chop the words up any way you want. And Abulafia believed in meditations on combinations of letters. Okay? If you meditate on combinations of letters, we'll see soon what these combinations of letters are, that will allow your consciousness to expand, and that will allow you to receive prophecy as he indeed claimed for himself. Now, why language? Language is not only infinite, it's also abstract. The letters have infinite permutations. This is based on a view, the opposite of Maimonides, that language is not conventional. We tend today, if we're not mystical, to think of language as conventional. We all agree to call a table a shulchan in Hebrew, so fine, it's a shulchan. We could have called it a kisei, and we could have called the chair a shulchan. We could have called the table a chair and a chair a table. It doesn't matter, as long as everybody agrees to call it that. This is a view in which each word has an essential connection to the essence of the thing that it describes. Letters, too, have essential essences. And this is especially true in Hebrew, which is the language that God thinks in, the language that God creates in. Now, the heart of the Hebrew language is not the entire Hebrew language. Shulchan, kisei, table, and chair are holy and they're part of the language, but they're not the heart of the language. The heart of the language are the divine names. Okay, it's the divine names with which God creates. Okay. This, by the way, this idea of language being essential and language being the source of everything, for Abulafia was not just true of Hebrew, but was true of all languages, all human languages in the world. Okay. He says that you have to meld other languages to the holy tongue so that every word that is uttered should be spelled out in the 22 holy letters. Okay? The best way to think about this is to think about what Jews did in Jewish languages around the world, like Yiddish and Ladino, that were spelled in Hebrew letters, also Judeo-Arabic, right? So Abulafia is saying that you can even expand your consciousness and reach prophecy to a degree with other languages than Hebrew, as long as you connect them to their source in Hebrew. You visualize them as composed of the 22 holy letters of Hebrew, even though those alphabets may have different numbers of letters, right? Let's say English, okay, has 26 letters. So instead of visualizing English with the Latin alphabet of 26 letters, visualize English in Hebrew letters. And it doesn't matter whether the Hebrew letters are gibberish in English, because you can do meditations on those letters in the ways that we will possibly see. So Latin, Spanish, Arabic, any language can become a meditative object, but the best one still, of course, is Hebrew, which is the heart of all of them, and of which they are expansions. Now, how do you do this? How do you do this? You have combinations of letters that are described in his mystical guides. What the mystic does is combines letters. When you combine letters, you are not trying necessarily to make words. If you remember the example I gave you last week with the Ramban, who takes the first verse, in the beginning God creates the heaven and the earth, created, and in Hebrew, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. And the Ramban says, hey, if I cut the words differently, right, I can instead of Bereshit bara, I can say, how did it go? Bara, wait, bara, excuse me, bara yit bere, right? And we got a mystical idea out of that by cutting the words differently. It's bere, right? Bere, birosh, that's what it was. Birosh, yit bare Elohim. That was the combination we had last week, right? That Elohim, who is part of the Sfirot, gets created out of the Ein Sof, or out of Keter, okay? That's how the Ramban did it. The Ramban is looking for words, different words that you can find if you cut the letters in a different way. But Abulafia, he isn't even looking for words, okay? It's the very form of the letters and their sequence that counts, okay? And what he does is he compares it to music. He says, know that letter combinations are like what the ear hears when notes are combined into a melody. Different instruments join to make a symphony. The ear picks up on changes, and the strings that are struck by the left hand or struck by the right hand vibrate, bringing the sweet sound to the ears. The ecstasy can only be produced through various changing combinations. So too with letter combinations. They roll off the pen, says Abulafia, and you get the impression that this meditation is done through writing. In other words, he has a parchment in front of him, and he has a pen, but he's not like writing a book. He's just letting the pen go, right? It's kind of like if you've heard of Christians who talk in tongues. So Abulafia, he's writing in tongues. He's having this automatic writing, and letters are just coming out, okay? And whatever letters come out, he gives the example of Aleph, Mem, Shin. Now, Aleph, Mem, Shin in Hebrew is Emesh, which means yesterday. But if you pull the letters in different ways, you could get Masa, which means something that you carry. You could get Asham, which means guilt. You could get Shema, which means maybe. You could get She'im, which means if. You could get Me'esh, from fire, okay? And what the mind does is it just juggles these letters over and over and over again and sees all the different things that they that they form into and then form out of and then form into and then form out of. All I had to do was just let these 3 letters fall out of my pen, and I already have a whole bunch of ways to juggle them that I.
You just went silent and invisible.
What?
Your
I thought there was a question.
your camera went off.
My camera went off?
Yep,
It's lit up. It's lit up, meaning it should be on.
it just says letter S.
I honestly don't know why.
At least
'cause
the
it should-
sound is back.
Okay, the sound is back. At least we have that.
Yes.
All right. So what we have is that in his books, he deals with the numerical values of letters also. You not only meditate on what the letters combine into, but also on the numbers that they give rise to. And this has huge implications for interpreting the Torah. The Ramban was radical enough, cutting the words in a different way. Abulafia is saying, you take all the letters in the Torah and you throw them in the air and you keep juggling them and juggling them and juggling them. And you just meditate on all of the different things that come out of it. And if we said last week that the Torah is the face of God, so for Abulafia, it's like when you're juggling the letters, right? You're seeing God in all kinds of different ways. And if we can sum all of this up in a very simple way, if you take a guy like, I shouldn't say a guy, if you take a figure like the Rashba, an extraordinary scholar, a serious man, this stuff to him sounds both imbecilic and nuts, okay? This is what you write books about, okay? This is what you teach people in your study hall. This is nonsense, okay? Reminds me of the famous statement of Gershom Shalom, right? Where Sal Lieberman was introducing Gershom Shalom at a conference at JTS, and Sal Lieberman, he thought he didn't have any business with Kabbalah. He was a serious Talmudist. So Sal Lieberman, when he called up Gershom Shalom to speak, he introduced Professor Shalom. He said that nonsense is nonsense, but the history of nonsense is scholarship. Okay, and here you have that too. For the Rashba, this was simply insane. All of this juggling letters in the air in order to meditate on them and become a prophet. I don't know what that is, but okay. Somebody said something here about a Baba Booba, but I don't know what that is. But maybe it won't be as crazy as what we're about to read now. Okay, here's a text from his book, which is called. I didn't put the title in. I should have. A book that he called Chaye Ha'olam Haba, the life of the world to come. Look how lofty he talks. It has become known to us through the prophetic, godly Torah tradition. That when the enlightened scholar combines letters, Tishpa alav ruach hakodesh, the divine spirit will rest upon him. Ve'zelech ha'ot, this is the sign. When you meditate on these holy letters in truth. And you join them, the last letter with the first letter, and the first letter with the last letter. You just juggle them. Roshim toch v'tochim rosh, the middle letter with the first letter, and the first letter with the middle letter. Ve'asofim atoch ve'atochim asof, and the last letter with the middle letter, and the middle letter with the last letter. V'chein kulam lefi ze haderech, and so on and so forth in this manner. Yigalgel kol ot panim ve'achor. You juggle every letter backwards and forwards. B'nigunim rabim. Okay? Perushim nikudot. With different kinds of, it means melody, but what he probably means is hagia, is vocalization. Okay? You vocalize the letters in different ways. So what you're basically is you're also reading. You're reading Abba, Kadi, Wu, okay, and as you're juggling them. V'yatchil b'nachat. And first you juggle them slowly. And you say these vocalizations slowly. V'yimaher od, and then you go faster. וירגיל עצמו עד שיהיה בקיא מאוד בחילופי הצירופים זה בזה. And you make yourself used to it, used to doing this until it becomes like second nature to you to do all this juggling and all of this meditating. וצריך לו גם כן שיהיה בקיא מאוד בסתרי תורה וחוכמתם. You also have to know the secrets of the Torah. You can imagine the Rashba shaking his head when he reads that. כדי שיכיר מה שיבוא לו בגלגלי הצירוף, so that he'll know the meanings of the things that come out of the combinations. ויתעורר ליבו בחושבו הציור השכלי האלוהי הנבואי. And his heart will be aroused when he starts picturing this prophetic image of God. The point of all of this juggling and meditating is to receive prophecy. And what he'll begin to achieve through all these combinations as he does them in his private meditation. He should be all by himself. Titchadesh, I just lost the, right? Titchadesh malach, drives me nuts. Oh. Okay. Titchadesh malach, where are we? Titchadesh alav pachad urada, fear and trembling. V'yamdu sarot rosho, tzmarmoret, goosebumps, right? His hairs will stand on end. V'yizdaz de'u evarav, and his limbs will start going crazy. He's like epilepsy or something. And if he is worthy and merits it, the spirit of the living God will fall upon him. The verse, which is about the Messiah, that the spirit of the Lord will fall upon him of wisdom and understanding, knowledge, and the fear of God. משכו כל גופו, מראשו ועד רגליו בשמן המשחה. And he will feel that his entire body was anointed with the anointing oil. The anointing oil with which prophets and kings were anointed. Okay? And notice the word Mashiach in here, right? You are anointed almost as your own personal Messiah, if you merit this divine presence resting upon you through all of this meditation. V'yem misharet Adonai ushlucho, you become the servant and messenger of God. V'yikra malach Elohim, v'yikare maybe, malach Elohim will be called the angel of God. V'yichuneh shemo keshem rabo, v'hu Shaddai, asher kinuhu metatron, sara panim. You become, God's name rests upon you, just like it rests on this angel Metatron, who is spoken of in mystical literature. So you identify with God, right? God is within you through this experience. You're made holy, you become anointed with the anointing oil. And for those of you who do know Hebrew, you see that the language is rather easy. Right? He didn't write in some kind of highfalutin language or technical Talmudic language. He's really writing a manual here for the beginner. He's opening the secrets. Anyone who wants to experience this, I'm writing it for you in very clear language how to do it. Now, other kinds of mystical experience. Hikon likrat Elohecha Yisrael. Prepare to meet your God, O Israel. Achen atzmecha, prepare yourself. V'ached levavecha v'taher gufcha. Make your heart one and purify your body to meet God. Uvchar lecha makom yuchad. Choose for yourself a special place. Shelo yishama kolcha l'shum adam. Since you're going to be speaking all of these vocalizations of the juggling of the letters, nobody should be around to hear you. Not because they think you're crazy, although maybe that's also a reason, but you should have privacy. V'haya yachidu miyuchad u'mitboded b'bli acher. You should do this all by your lonesome. V'shav b'cheder or ba'aliyah, in a room or in an attic. Ve'al tikaleh sodcha l'shum adam. To tell no one else that you are doing this. V'im tuchal sheta'aseu bayom b'bayit. And if you can do it during the day at home, yafilu ma'at, even a little, then do that. But the best time to meditate is at night. Get rid of all the matters of this world from your thoughts. At that time when you meditate. And you're preparing yourself to speak with your Creator. And you ask your Creator to let you know His might. A prophecy. That's really strange, right? You should have your talit and your tefillin on, and that's very strange because it's at night. You don't wear talit and tefillin at night. They're not mitzvot of the night. But he says you should do this at night and you should have them on. V'sim talmudecha uvoracha biyadecha. Your knowledge and your Creator, keep hold of it. Kedei shetiyeh yarei v'charev mipnei hashchina asher hi imach ba'et hahi. So that you'll be in fear of trembling of the presence of God, or maybe the Shekhinah of the Sfirot, maybe even though he wasn't into that, which are with you at this time. Clean your body, yourself, your body, and your clothes. If possible, all your clothing should be white. All of this helps for fear and love of God. And if it's at night, lots of candles for the ambiance to light up the room. Okay, take for yourself ink and a pen and some kind of writing tablet. And with joy, you're going to begin your writing in tongues, if we can call it that. And combine few letters with many letters. And switch them and juggle them around rapidly until your heart is stirred and warmed. And pay attention to all of these movements and to all of the combinations that they are forming as you toss them around. And when your heart is very astir and warm from all of these combination makings, And you learn new things, discovered new things from the combinations. Asher lo hesagtam, see the word even. Asher lo hesagtam b'Kabbalah, that you did not receive through tradition. You reveal new secrets by doing this. The Kabbalah enoshit, okay, through human tradition. And that you did not know through rationality, because rationality is a dead end. This is what goes beyond rationality. This is what goes beyond the guide of the perplexed from the beginning of class today. Then you are ready to receive the emanation of God. You get this emanation rapidly, all kinds of words. You're even going to draw, so to speak, God in the higher angels. To picture them as human beings. Standing or sitting around you. You're picturing the heavenly court, including God himself. When the king and his servants want to send a messenger or someone to do their will, that's you. You're there in court because they're about to tell you what to do as the messenger of God. This is what you will have when you throw down the quill and the ink. Or you've already dropped them. Maybe in your ecstasy you already dropped the pen and the ink. And when all of this intelligent emanation comes to you, both your inner and outer organs will be weak. Your whole body will be like in a storm. And you're going to feel like it's like the moment of death has arrived. You can't continue living. Because your soul is about to leave your body in ecstasy. As it imbibes and realizes that which you have encountered. In that moment, in this ecstasy, it's joy, it's ecstasy, it's not bad. In this joy and ecstasy, you will prefer death over life. Because such death happens only to the body. And through this kind of ecstasy, does the soul live forever? And apparently it's connected to the resurrection of the dead. This is how the resurrection of the dead will happen. And then you will know that you have reached the emanation, the reception. You've received the emanation of God. And I summed it up here a little bit. You have here in these paragraphs that I just read and translated, a very clear like this description of mystical experience. He wants the reader to know exactly what it feels like. So that the reader, when the reader actually does this stuff, the reader will know when he's been successful. But this is totally different than the mainstream elitist Kabbalah. There's no... Jennifer's asking a question. Yeah. Jennifer is saying,
religious
Hmm.
fanaticism, it would actually be a modern.
Okay. Jennifer is saying that Avraham Abulafia could have had a much quieter career if he had just done private meditation, right? If he had done this stuff and without adding the prophecy and visiting the Pope and all these things, right? He could have had a much quieter life. In any case, it's different than the mainstream Kabbalah. There's no sfirot. He doesn't talk about that. He's apparently not interested in it. There's only letters and combinations and meditations on them. He calls this prophetic Kabbalah. He also calls it the Kabbalah of the letters. Notice that there's very little attention paid to the mitzvot, unlike the mainstream Kabbalah, which is always talking about mitzvot. There's no mitzvot at all here. That's what I meant in the beginning of class when I said that Avraham Abulafia probably kept the mitzvot, but they weren't central to what he was doing. And when you read the stuff, you see that, right? The mitzvot are not central to what he's doing. It's amazing, by the way, on that point, that not even Hebrew is central to what he's doing. Hebrew is central, right? But you can even begin with other languages. Okay? And so the things that were at the center of the mainstream Jewish experience and the mainstream Kabbalah were not at the center of Abulafia's experience. Okay? Abulafia is looking for the experience. That's his goal. That's the goal that he's giving to the reader of the manual. The goal is not to fix the sfirot. The goal is to have the experience. The experience also has magical potential, which the mainstream Kabbalah talked a lot less about. And especially, to sum up, the practitioners are outsiders. They are not the rabbinic elite. He was writing for people who were not the greatest Talmudists of the generation. And this is also what causes conflict with the rabbinic elite. However, despite all the conflict and despite the fact that a lot of people thought he was crazy, Avraham Abulafia had a great influence on Kabbalah in later generations. This goes back to what Don asked earlier, and I told him we'll talk about it at the end. And now the end is here, and we'll talk about it. Avraham Abulafia became ever more famous. And hundreds of years later, people like read about Avraham Abulafia, the Kabbalist, and they didn't know that in his time, he was like the weird Kabbalist who was put in the corner. Okay? And it's very popular today. You find Kabbalists today who talk an awful lot about Avraham Abulafia. And what we might say is this, to sum it up, that we have the mainstream Kabbalah of the Sfirot. We have the outsiders Kabbalah with the letters and the combinations and the juggling and all of that. And they were opposed to each other during his lifetime. The mainstream Kabbalah thought that this kind of Kabbalah was just stupid or crazy. And yet what eventually happened is that they combined. Meaning that Kabbalah in later centuries loved both of it. Right? Kabbalists love the Sfirot and they love letter combinations, and they simply did both. What was a combination in his, a contradiction in his time became a combination later on, including to this very day. To this very day, people will less distinguish that. They will see both this letterology and the Sfirot as aspects of Kabbalah without much distinguishing between them. Okay? In any case, there's no doubt that his prophetic experiences were what gave him either the guts or the insanity to try to go visit the Pope and to think that he is going to redeem the Jews and all of that. Kabbalah has the potential for these kinds of feelings, for these kinds of claims, and he was the first significant one, the first significant Kabbalistic Messiah. We'll stop with that, and if people have more questions, bevakasha.
What makes him Messianic?
Well, the fact that he went to the Pope to declare himself the Messiah. Plus the fact that he calls himself the Messiah, and he says that through experiences, you experience yourself as a kind of Messiah. Yeah. Jennifer is saying that there's really two kinds of Messiah here. There's the Messiah who's going to redeem the Jews, which apparently he thought he was when he went to Rome. But he also talks about a personal kind of Messiah. You anoint somebody to be your servant, right? Like the king who is anointed is the servant of God, or the prophet, or the priest who are anointed. And so you can become a kind of personal Messiah, a servant of God, when you have these mystical experiences. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so we finished the unit now. Next week we're going to do Lurianic Kabbalah, which is even more radical than the stuff that we've been doing, which leads us directly into Shabbatai Tzvi, the biggest Messiah of them all. Coming up.
Nice Muslim
Have a good
movie.
evening, everybody. Okay, Jennifer's talking about a Baba Booba, who some of you may know about, but I didn't. Mm-hmm.
Look it up on YouTube, Gulf War.
Okay.
I think it's Moni Masumi,
Yeah.
comedian that plays the character. And you should see it at least once or twice.
Okay.
Some of the stuff that he did. It's cool.
People need to mute themselves. There's some kind of background noise somewhere.
Okay.
And he would come with the peyote and this man out in the house.
Okay, apparently this was some kind of television character from the Gulf War. Baba Booba. That's what it.
Analyzing words and letters and stuff and coming up with gematria and all
Okay.
his prophecies and predictions.
I thought it
So
was.
bye bye everybody.
I thought that was a song that
Baba-
won the Eurovision.